Good evening, everybody, and welcome to what is the Refuse to Lose podcast. Very welcome along to it. My name is Kieran McGinley, and joining me in this one is Austin Badgerman Smith. Austin, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, Kieran. Welcome, everyone. And I think the first thing we have to talk about here is why it's called the Refuse to Lose podcast, right?
Yes.
That's what we'll have to get into. And we've been looking around in recent days. It was an idea we really only brought along to start a podcast like 2 days ago after we were done doing the AOR F1. AOR PS4 F3 stream. And we found this beautiful quote from none other than the legendary Dale Earnhardt. The winner ain't the one with the fastest car, it's the one who refuses to lose. And I think, does that encapsulate racing and sim racing as well. And it's also, I think it's kind of poetic already.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is I know about Dale Earnhardt. I've watched videos of him, the Intimidator, the legendary number 3. He just changed what everybody thought about, this whole stock car racing. There's me, who's the open wheel mantra. You cannot make contact. It's not allowed. And Dale Earnhardt just goes, well, you can, and you will.
Look, in your world, you can't, but where we're driving, in the US of A with those cars, oh, you definitely can.
And so we named it that because we thought it was a very catchy thing, the Refuse to Lose podcast, where here, basically, we're going to be talking about esports, what's happened with us in terms of commentary. It's quite a neutral platform, so we're not under it. It's one of the rare opportunities, Austin, that we actually get to talk about different leagues altogether, because now we're not under a certain stream. So normally when we're streaming for a certain league, we can't talk about others. Here, we're free to just talk about esports however we like.
Yeah, and I think that gives us a little bit of freedom here to really go into the nitty-gritty of what's going on in F1 esports. We're not just going to cover the F1 game and the leagues surrounding it. We're going to cover basically anything sim racing related, whether that's the F1 games, whether it's GT Sport. I think one thing we are going to talk about today, we should talk about, is the Grid game, the new game, which coincidentally happens to be made by Codemasters, same as the F1 games, but it is a racing game, and from what I've seen, it's a really good one. We're going to talk about I don't know how much you are into Forza. Me personally, not so much, mostly because I don't own a computer that can run it or an Xbox, and it's not on PS4. But we're going to talk about pretty much anything sim racing related, and try to go in depth.
Yeah, we're going to try and make it bi-weekly, because we said to each other, if we did it every week, we might sort of draw a blank on what to talk about. At least every other week, plenty of things can happen. And like you say, Austin, I think a great place to start is pretty much where one of my favorite ever racing games was born, Grid. Of course, the original game, I believe, came out back in 2008, I believe it was. And then actually, rarely you get a game released in Europe before America, but that's exactly what happened. So about May 2008, and my goodness, what a game. I could sit there for hours.
Yeah, the thing for me is, back in the day, it was called Race Driver Grid. And that kind of gives a hint to what the roots of it were. The roots were, you in the UK, you know it as the Toka series.
Great series. I've never played it myself, but from what I've seen, it is just amazing. So the fact that it's part of that series is just the world of compliments. And to be honest with you, visually, it looks amazing. And the damage model made me realize, hey, I've had it way too easy for so long. This damage model is actually, it punishes mistakes, and that's about it.
Yeah, and here in Germany, it was known as DTM Race Driver. So what Codemasters back in the day, the first episode or first game that came out was 2003. I was 10 years old. And so what they did is in the UK, they've released it as the Toka Race Driver game. In Germany, they actually put in a lot of DTM stuff and focused on the DTM, which I would argue back in the day had a much higher standing in Germany than it has right now. It was pretty much the second biggest racing series that was watched in terms of perception here in Germany, only after F1, which obviously, during the time of Michael Schumacher, 2003 was his sixth title. Obviously F1 was the number one, which it obviously also still is, but DTM was pretty much right up there. And they published it as a DTM game here. And I think the second one, DTM Race Driver 2, was the first one that I had. And I was addicted to it. You have no idea. I was playing that so much. And so I've never played Race Driver Grid, unfortunately.
What?
Yes.
Are you kidding me? You've never played Grid? My goodness.
I've never played Grid. No, but again, I've played a predecessor of it with DTM Race Driver, as you know, a Toka Race Driver 2. And I was so addicted to it. I was playing it so much, and that was the first game for me that really, I would say, taught me how to drive properly, because it was pretty much the first game that at least for me, punished you for driving recklessly. Before that, the only racing game the only two racing games I think I came in contact with were Mario Kart 64.
Again, good game.
Which definitely doesn't punish you for contact and for crashing other drivers. And the other game was also on Nintendo 64. It was called Roadsters.
Roadsters?
Yeah, and you probably never heard of that.
I have never heard of that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it wasn't that popular of a game. It received, from GameSpot, it received a 4.8 out of 10. So you know how bad it is. Come on.
What, 8.4 back in the day?
No. Turn it around. 4.8.
Oh, 4.8.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not so bad.
No, it's just worse than half of the games. It had 34 cars. It had licensed cars from manufacturers. It had Mitsubishi, Alfa Romeo, Lotus. It also had some unlicensed cars, but it was pretty cool for its time. It was also a PlayStation game I had on Nintendo 64, but that also didn't punish you too much for contact. It had no damage model, nothing. And so, you could drive recklessly. Then DTM Race Driver came around, and it did have a damage model. And so that, to me, was the first game that really got me into driving carefully and making overtakes and learning really how to compete in a racing game.
Well, I think you had that essence. The open wheelers were quite a handful. I remember them being quite a handful in Race Driver Grid.
Yes.
But the thing is, it was an arcadey sort of game. People tried to play it with a wheel, and they found it wasn't quite realistic enough for a racing wheel. But at the same time, it would have been nice if you could have it. And it looks like with this new rebooted Grid game, I mean, they've tried to reboot Grid in the past, Grid 2, which didn't get as many critics. It got actually much more critics. What am I saying? Because it felt too arcadey. Grid was on that fine line of it was the fine line between quite arcadey, but also punishes you if you make a mistake. So you could launch the open wheelers into the first corner of the Nürburgring if you really wanted to. You could slide the back end out. It's one of those games where you can sort of look at third person and not feel guilty about breaking the immersion. It was just one of those rare games that got it right between a damage model and a sense of arcade fun. They knew exactly what they were doing because they brought in the Demolition Derby. That, to me, was a game changer.
Yeah, I'm going back. The first Demolition Derby game that I was playing was literally called Demolition Derby, and it was on the PlayStation 1. But I think the PlayStation 2 still had downwards compatibility, so I was still able to play the PS1 game on the PS2. But that was my first Demolition Derby game, and I like that a lot. But PS1 graphics, so it was very pixely.
How dare
probably
you?
Probably a resolution of 200 times 120 or something.
I mean, you know more than I do just by quoting that figure.
No, I'm just estimating. It was probably better, but it looked like 200 times 120 pixels, which is just bad. Even for those standards, I mean, not for PS1 standards, but if you're playing it on a PS2, yeah, it's not a comparison to Gran Turismo 4, which arguably was the best racing game on PS4, if not the best game on PS4 and PS2. I mean, but yeah, having a Demolition Derby in those Codemasters games, Race Driver Grid, yeah, that was weird.
It was a bit weird, I have to say, but fun.
Certainly, but I don't know. Never gave me anything. I just went for the really mostly at least in DTM Race Driver, I always went for the DTM. I tried to. Oh, hold on, no, not just the ones I liked the most were the DTM, the V8 Supercar, and the Formula Ford was in there as well. Those were pretty cool. The super trucks were pretty nice as well, but yeah, Formula Ford was a little tough to handle.
Well, one of the great things about Grid that I will always remember was the battle with Raven West. The fact that you got to build your own team, you got to give it its own livery, and then after that, you had to get sponsors. You literally had to have sponsors. Then you had to build your team up and up and up. You'd get a certain amount of money. Then you could buy a teammate. And he'd start off as not the greatest teammate in the world. They had different voice actors for different drivers. It was a limited range, but it all depended on nationality. So each driver felt like they had a personality behind them. And to this day, I have not seen a game like that ever since. And part of me wants just an entire reboot of the previous game, because to me, there's nothing wrong with it. Of course, there's always a problem with a game. No game is 100% perfect. And it's that rose-tinted glasses problem. You look back at the past, you look back at 2008, 11 years ago, and you think, wow, that's the greatest racing game of all time. There was a point in my life when I thought F1 2003 was the greatest racing game of all time. I am totally wrong, and I only know its damage model wasn't great. If you lost your front wing, you could then pull off 250 miles an hour or whatever down towards the hairpin at the Hockenheimring. But the point is that to me, Grid is a great game. The rebooted Grid, I hope, has that essence that it knows where it's come from. The fact is that Grid 2 went away from keeping that fine line between arcade and realism, where it just went full arcade. You could drift any car around any corner at any speed, and drivers lost that, or people lost that edge. Not only that, but they also got rid of the cockpit cam, which to many people was a cardinal sin. Then Grid Autosport came along, and it went the other way. It went more towards realism, and again, it got mixed reviews because people played it and thought, well, this isn't Grid. To me, this is not Grid. So I'm hoping this time with the rebooted Grid, they've had a couple of attempts now, but I really hope they get that fine line between the realism and the arcade, where they have a great damage model coupled with fantastic handling cars that feel awesome to drive, like they nailed 11 years ago. I really hope that this is the Grid game that takes me back 11 years.
Well, what I've seen of it is that the one thing they have nailed from the 2008 game is the whole idea of your opponent's even though they are AI, actually having personalities and feeling distinct from one another. Because they have implemented, I don't know if you've seen any trailers, any videos of it, but they have implemented this rivalry system where if you, let's say you touch an opponent a little bit too often, and that differs from AI to AI, from driver to driver. Some drivers, you bump the rear once and they're your enemy, they're your nemesis. Others you can get away with 2 or 3 before they're getting agitated. Then you have your teammate that you're always fighting against, and this whole, it feels very personalized and very personal. It doesn't feel like a game where you always race against the same AI 20 times, 30 times, however many are on the track. It feels like you're driving against real drivers, except you're not.
I think the problem is that it's always going to have the rose-tinted glasses problem. People are never going to be satisfied with a rebooted game, and they're never going to truly be satisfied with a rebooted series. Just see Star Wars; they got it wrong. Apparently, to some people, the first time around they got it way wrong, apart from Episode 3. But this is not a Star Wars podcast. This is an esports podcast.
Yes.
But it goes to show the whole rose-tinted glasses thing. People love the original, and that's all people want. And then sometimes when you give them the original again, they say, wow, I actually like this game. To me, it's a lose-lose situation. So, yeah, I hope Codemasters have got the reboot down to a T, because with the sequel of Grid 2, I mean, it faced the problem of having Race Driver Grid being its predecessor. And to me, that's always going to be tough to live up to. A game like Grid was always going to be tough to beat. And part of me sort of wished that they never carried it on. If Race Driver Grid was the last series in the Race Driver series, I would have had no complaints. And even today, some people will be saying, oh, why don't you make a sequel to Grid? But to me, sometimes I look back and I think, did it really need one? I don't think it did. But you know, they've gone through Grid 2. They had Grid Autosport, so it makes sense to try again at Race Driver Grid and hopefully capture that essence of 11 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how good it is in 3 days. October 11th is when it will be released to the public, and everyone who wants to play it can get it and play it. I don't know if I'm gonna get it, considering, you know, the price. I mean, I would get it if I had the money, but I'm not sure if I don't know how much it's gonna cost. I think I saw for the Europeans here watching, I think the PC day one version is like 35 euros. And so that's not too bad. You know, it's not the 60 euro game that most games tend to be. At least not on PC. I don't know about console right now. I would have to look, which I'm gonna do right now because I have my console.
Well, whilst you look, on Steam, the game is £44.99, so £45 for our British friends. And of course, if you're European, yes, you're right, it's close to €50. But again, it's not like a big blockbuster. And I think Codemasters has that background of not being a AAA developer because, well, it's much smaller than a AAA developer. People expect so much from Codemasters. But actually, it's quite, in comparison to the titans of EA and you know, you've got, I'm trying to think of another game developer and I'm having trouble, but Activision, you've got Konami as well, you know, Nintendo, you're going up against so many behemoths that it's actually quite refreshing getting games from a relatively small company.
Yeah. It really is. I just looked, wow, on PS4, well, you're gonna have to pay a bit more, 70 euros, which is basically the current standard apparently for all games released on PlayStation that are at least somewhat decent. You know, of course you get these like small games, indie games and all that for less, but even small studios, unfortunately on PlayStation at least, often release games for 70 euros these days. And I don't know. I understand that Sony's arguing, oh well, but you can use it on 3 different consoles, or if you want to buy it for 2 friends or something, you can use it on 3 accounts. But who does that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the thing is, Grid's a great game. What do you guys think? Are we talking absolute rubbish, or do you remember Grid as a great game? Maybe you didn't like Grid. Maybe you're one of the lucky people who've got to play Grid early. If you are, don't tell us anything. You're under contract, probably. I don't know.
No, they're not. They're not. I've seen videos today from I think Arava, who has played Grid. I've seen before from, I think it was Super GT has played some, has uploaded a bit, maybe a few others. But they're not. I think they are under contract most likely, but I don't think that they're still under a full embargo. I think usually the way Codemasters handles embargoes is that they say for content creators 3 days before public release, you're allowed to post. They did that with F1 2019. Or I think with F1 2019, they even said a full week. I think there was so much content out there, and I was like, I want to play this too. Can you please stop? But yeah, with Grid, I've seen videos today. I think it's at least 3 days before release. Maybe I've missed videos from before, but no, content creators can definitely post content on it right now if they have the game.
And I think we'll nicely wrap up Grid with a little bow there and move on to something else, Austin. Well, the great thing about this podcast is we have a rough idea of what we're going to talk about, but not really. So
Yes.
it's relatively unscripted. So if any of you viewers have a question for us, just post it in the chat. If it's esports related, we'll have a chat about it. But yeah, question to you then: favorite racing game ever that you've ever played? And Austin, I'm going to throw that question over to you. What's your most favorite racing game that you've ever played?
Wow. There's too many. The top one, man, I'm
It's a tough question.
Yeah, I've always been more of a touring car guy than I've been an open wheeler guy. It's just the way I am, and I would say my driving ability as well. I'm not good at handling open wheelers, and so I'm gonna have to go to the Gran Turismo series, and especially because it just coincided with basically all of my youth. GT4, Gran Turismo 4 to me was. And you talked about the rose tinted glasses a bit. If I looked at it today, I would probably cringe at the graphic. But obviously, at the time, PS2 graphic, how much you get out of that? Yeah, not much. But the amount of the sheer amount of cars they had in this game, what was it? Over 1,000. And the amount of tracks, they had over 100 different variations and such of tracks in there. It was in terms of volume, it was probably the biggest racing game ever created. And in terms of its feel and in terms of graphics for the time, I think it's a racing game that will probably, again, measured by its time, never be matched.
I think then for me, I'm going to have to field the open wheelers, I guess. One of the greatest games I've ever played was F106. Now, there's 2 versions of this. You have the PS2, which is the original version, and then there was the remastered version for the PS3. Back when remastering games wasn't really a thing, you had classics or Platinum Edition on PS2. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Which was a re-release game, but maybe it had a couple of tweaks to it, maybe an update, because patches weren't really a thing. Downloadable patches were not a thing back then.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a huge thing. But it was kind of sad because I was growing up not really reading publications. I just loved to play the F1 games, and I bought F106, and I thought, oh my god, this is one of the greatest games. And the handling wasn't great. It was overly harsh with its corner cut penalties. The AI were needlessly aggressive at times. But you know what? Do you know what you have in F106 that you don't have in an F1 2019 career mode? That is reliability and failures that put you out of the race entirely. You had that in F106, but not in F1 2019. And I'm going to come on to that bit in later on. Lots of people complaining about DRS failures in the esports series, but we'll come on to that later. But for me, there's an essence of, again, with the rose-tinted glasses things, it looked quite good when I saw it. But then again, I was playing on a TV that when you switched off still left static all over the screen. Sort of style, and the color was all the way up, and the hertz were all the way up to 60, even though I didn't even know what that meant. But the point was that I had so much fun. I sunk a lot of hours into that game, and yeah, for me it was great. But what the sad thing was I saw there was a re-release on PS3, and I've never played the re-release. Never played it. Not because I don't want to, but because I can't. I'd be playing it all the time. And so when it came to the next season, I thought, oh, yes, what's the next game? What's the next F1 game? I want to play it. And I would go to the shops for about 2 months every week, seeing if there was one released. And this was a time when I didn't really use the internet to research anything or anything like that. I didn't look at reviews. I just wanted to play an F1 game. And there was none. And there was no official F1 game until 2009, which the less
on the
better.
On the Wii,
and the PSP, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So for me, that's one of the great games. And then a barren run happened, so I was left with F1 2006 until pretty much F1 2010 came around. And by then, I'd grown up a bit. I'd seen that the F1 2006 edition, the handling wasn't great. The damage model was amazing, because if you made one mistake, that was your front wing off. I love that about it. But yeah, it was not without its glitches. Pit lanes were a bit of a kerfuffle at times. But yeah, I think for me, with that rose-tinted glasses feeling, it was the first game I'd invested so much in the career mode. And yeah, it was one of the first things I won a championship in, and to me, all those years ago, that meant a lot to me.
I can definitely understand that. To me, F1 2000. Hold on, no. So the first game that the first, I don't even know if that's one of the first, but the F1. What's it called? The F1 Challenge, I think, which was a really weird game back in the day. Of course, EA of all places had the license for F1 games, which horrible days. And they released a game which was really weird. It was called F1, I think F1 Challenge, and what they did, and I like that idea just generally, is they released, I think it was in 2002, they released a game that had 4 seasons of F1 in one game. It was from 1999 to 2002. And they had all the drivers from all these 4 years. They had all the cars from all these 4 years, all the tracks. And remember what happened between 2001 and 2002. Well, there was a track that was completely rebuilt on the calendar. Today we know it, and back in the day we also knew it as Hockenheim. 2001 was the last time it went through the forest. 2002 we had the version we're driving now with the parabolica and the hairpin. So that to me was just absolutely amazingly done. When you play a game and you go to Hockenheim, and first 3 seasons you go, oh yeah, Hockenheim through the forest. 4th season you keep on playing and you're like, wait, that's different.
Well, yeah. Well, I was going to say that I do remember that game. I had that game. In fact, I probably still have the cover box for it somewhere around here. But I remember it a bit differently. I remember it as one of the buggiest F1 games I have ever played.
It was, but it was one of the first. I think it was the first F1 game for me, and you will always have fond memories. You will always disregard the bugs and just especially if you're young. I think the older you get as a computer or as a video game player, the more you're going to start to care about bugs and about glitches and about all of that. If you're young, you just want to play, you just want to have fun, so you disregard that and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever happens, developers aren't perfect, let's go on, let's keep on playing or restart or whatever. You know the glitches at some point and the bugs, and you know how to circumvent them, usually, for the most part. At least that's how I was. But yeah, that was my first F1 game. I have to say, for me, the most fond memories, though, for an F1 game is, you mentioned F1 2006. Its direct predecessor, F1 2005, for me was a game which I played a lot with friends. We all had it. We had a circle of friends here. I think we were like 4 or 5 guys. We all had it. We all, met and played it together. Obviously not with all 5, but I think we had, because remember, the PlayStation 2 only had 2 ports for controllers. And so what we had was one of these adapters, which allowed you to extend one of these ports for 4 controllers instead of just 1. So we could put up to 5 on there, but I think we can't. For the most part, we met up in groups of 3 to 4, and we just played, and sometimes we turned off damage, sometimes we turned the damage back on. We were like, I would say we were the closest thing here in Germany, and without recording, to what the YouTuber Championship was. just shooting the crap, just having a whole lot of fun. We didn't record it, unfortunately. I think we would have made a lot of subscribers back in the day. But my God, it was so much fun. It was so much fun. We were talking crap to each other. We were talking trash. And my God, it was more the social aspect of it that I look back on than the actual game. But the actual game was a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I do have to agree. The F105 was pretty good. It doesn't match for me F106 for reasons. And then there was this long gap, and we forget about F1 2009 because F1 2009 doesn't exist. We came to 2010, and it was, for me, 4 years since an F1 game had been released. 4 years. I had been waiting this game for so long, such a long time. And when the game came, visually, it was stunning. Like, compared to what we had before, it blew everything out of the water. The one thing, actually, there's 2 things that bug me, but the coloring of the game was so dark.
Yeah.
And it really put me off at points.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I remember the most fondly of F1 2005, going back to this a little bit, was the intro. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yes. One of the greatest opening soundtracks of all time, Muse of all bands. Oh, what a song. And now, guess where that song is? It's like on my favorites in playlist. And the fact that I grew up with that song says a lot.
Butterflies and Hurricanes, my God. It was the thing is, not just the song was great, because it has its ups and downs, and it starts building up, and then it goes completely berserk, then it goes slow again, it goes calm, and you have a little bit of piano in there, and then it goes boom again to just have an amazing finish and just end into a very calm, and it just fades out. And the fact that the whole video, the whole the whole imagery of the intro matched the energy of the song at any moment and at every moment. That is what made the intro so great. And I think you said one of the greatest intros to a racing game ever, or did you say just overall gaming?
I think I said that was one of the greatest intros ever.
Yeah,
and
I have to agree. I have to agree. It might in fact be the greatest intro ever to any video game, because everything just fit perfectly. You had everything in there. You had the testing, when you're out in, I mean, now they're doing it in Spain. I think back in the day they tested at Jerez, if I'm not mistaken. And you had the garage and the wind tunnel, but then you also had the glamour aspect of F1, where you had actors on the red carpet and stuff like that, and cameras and camera lenses shutting as someone's taking a picture. And it was such an iconic intro that I will never forget.
What I do remember about the F1 2005 intro was that they were driving on the longest straight in history. Like, yes. I'm talking longer than the straight at India. I'm talking they're accelerating longer than they are at Russia. It is the longest straight, and one of them loses it on a straight. Like, yeah.
But look, we're not looking into details. Again, what I care more about is the matching of the energy between the song and the imagery, and that blew me away.
We're gonna have to get this thing up, because they're going down one of the longest straights in history. I think they're implying it's at Canada, but even then, come on, it's not that long.
You want a screen share?
Well, I mean, we'll get copyright strike. We're on YouTube. We'll get copyright strike.
I don't think so. I think this counts. I'm willing to fight this.
I do not remember the F105 intro being 4 minutes long. That is not right. That's
if you look at it in its entirety,
it's about 2.5 minutes. But yeah, still. That was the thing. Oh yeah, they also blatantly lied in the game, because they made you have a safety car, but there's no safety car in the game. I don't know why they added that.
Yeah, that was weird. But yeah, 2 minutes 48, 2 minutes 49. I found 2 instances of it here. The 4 minute one, I don't know what's going on there, why it's over 4 minutes long, but
honestly, I think we're just gonna have to watch it, Austin.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a screen share.
I haven't really got a great video for it. Hang on.
But if you just enter F1 2005 intro, the second and the third are probably the best ones.
Yeah. All right. Oh, it's a very small screen. Hang on. Hold on a second, because you can tell I'm new to this.
We're having some technical difficulties. This is still a work in progress. And
yeah, of course it is. Of course it is.
I would call this podcast at this point a duct tape production.
Right. Okay. First of all, I don't know if sound's coming through. I have no idea.
It is a little bit, but not too much. Which
is good.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that this is still an amazing song, but as you said, Austin, you start off with testing. It's a blank car, a blank canvas.
Yeah, and the rain as well. It just makes it so eerie to watch.
Oh, memories are just flooding back to me.
Yeah, same. Absolutely the same. God.
And it goes away and whatnot. And
then the greatest thing is about to happen. And that flashed me so much. It's gonna now.
It's alive!
As the F1 car getting sentient. Wow, that just blew me away as I saw it. Yeah. Is that the longest straight? No, that's not the one.
No, it is the longest straight.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
No,
I don't think that was Canada. I think that was Suzuka.
Oh, that's Suzuka, but there's one later where they're at Canada. I think it's
okay.
Where is it? No. Oh, that's
still Suzuka.
Japan. That's definitely
Spoon.
Into Spoon. So it wasn't a straight that the BMW lost out. It was coming towards a corner, going through wide. You see, I wouldn't have remembered that otherwise.
He was losing it into Spoon, which is still very, hard to do. But
are there something you don't see every day anymore? Grid girls.
Yes.
Here it is. The longest straight ever. Here it is, Canada. and then switches to another circuit where it's
Suzuka again, isn't it? The rain effects. There's the safety car that's not in the game.
It doesn't exist. That's an interesting safety car, the SLK. It didn't. Of course, you see the safety car now as this massive behemoth, V10 SLS. That was it, the SLK. That's what it was before. Just watching in awe.
Yeah, and then just switching back from Schumacher's Ferrari at that point won the last 5 World Drivers' Championships, and I think constructors as well. And then switching back to the test car and basically showing that's what it could become.
That's what it could be. Wow, it's still an intro. 14 years later?
Yeah,
that still holds a candle.
Yeah,
to literally every other intro ever.
That's how good it was. That's how good it was. And thinking back, my God, I miss developers putting that much effort into an intro where they actually tried to match the imagery with the audio, with the song.
It's just, again, it's one of the greatest intros of all time. I just, hands up, I'll say that.
Yeah, and the song choice is just perfect because, again, I said it before, but I just want to mention it again because it's so dear to my. This is, by the way, the game that made me a huge Muse fan, to a point where I've been to multiple of their concerts. Every time I had a whole lot of fun. They're amazing live. In fact, I would argue they're better live than they are, in studio because of the experience and how much they're doing on stage. That they're like, it's fully choreographed and all. It's absolutely amazing. But what was I about to say? Oh yeah, the song choice, the energy of the song. I think it's a really good F1 song. That you start off slow, you accelerate into the song basically, and then at some point there comes a huge breaking point where you then turn into a corner and everything, the whole camera shot just fades away as you turn into a corner and disappear into the distance. You can compare it to an F1 car driving on a straight.
I think as well, the soundtrack of F1 2012 I think is one of the greatest soundtracks of all time for any F1 game. And that is tough to say. I don't know if you remember the soundtrack from F1 2012, Austin, but...
I don't.
Oh, my goodness. They made it for a while. They made it free, the soundtrack. I'm going to see
wow.
That's... I mean, a lot of effort went into the song. I'm trying to think who did the soundtrack now for F1 2012. I think Ian Livingstone made it. Yeah, that's right. And it's on SoundCloud still. You can still go over and listen to it. But yeah, such an amazing, amazing soundtrack. I think people will agree that it is one of the great soundtracks. But yeah, I think as well, we have to come to what's going on right now, Austin, and that is the Challenger Series in F1 Esports.
Yeah, for those that don't know, the Challenger Series is basically the second tier of F1 Esports. It's where those who weren't picked by a team, those who weren't able to get one of those 30 coveted seats, can recommend themselves to those teams for next season for F1 Esports. Maybe get picked. And I just have to say, I really enjoy the Challenger Series for multiple reasons. It is really good racing without being that high of a production value as F1 Esports is, where they're broadcasting from the Gfinity arena in London every time, and it's always live audience and all that. And correct me if I'm wrong. So the F1 Esports is always done where everyone's in the Gfinity area, everyone's on the simulator on not their own rig, but a rig that was that they've been given for that event by I think by the Gfinity Arena, probably, if not Codemasters or whoever is the sponsor of it. But the Challenger Series, everyone drives from home.
That's true. As actually, I made a mistake. What's going on right now is the Pro Series, but yeah, the Challenger Series. I've had a great honor in commentating over it through difficult circumstances for Justin, so it was bittersweet. But Justin's back there now doing what he always does, just providing a quality stream, and I was so, I was very, very honoured to be stepping into the commentary box with none other than Chris Buxton, who is one of the greats in esports, if not the great in esports. Just so great to work alongside him. Such a great guy. You can really bounce any conversation off each other. He thinks of something straight away and just replies to you no matter what you throw at him. It's just absolutely incredible. But yeah, the Challenger Series is good. The Pro Series, obviously, you've got them. I think that there's a big sponsoring behind them, which is New Balance as well. Yeah. So that was a big sponsor to have behind them, who supply some of the gear as well, like the shirts. And I must say, they are nicely designed shirts. Then it comes to the game, Austin. Now, the game itself, as we all know, no game is perfect. I even said before, Grid's not a perfect game. It never was. It never will be. But here we come to a game where you would think that it's got to have some sort of integrity behind it. There are problems in the game. There are problems in every game. But one of the sticking points seems to be that you get DRS failures. You can get DRS failures in the esports series. To be honest with you, see no problem in it. I see where people are coming from, where they say, it's unfair because it then gives other people the advantage. It doesn't reward true pace. But if you look at Fernando Alonso from 2007 onwards, he was very rarely rewarded for the true pace he had. And, sometimes motorsport is like that. Sometimes it giveth and sometimes it taketh away. And you do need that element of luck when it comes to motorsports. And you kind of need a similar thing for esports, because what can realistically go wrong in esports? You can have a disconnection, which is seen as a retirement. That's one of the equivalents of a massive engine failure. Or you can have a DRS failure. I think a DRS failure may be harsh. It may be seen as unfair by other people, but I think keep it in, because then you've got drivers who are facing adversity. And even with a failure, you should be able to see through that failure to see someone's talent, as has been proved in the past.
Yeah, and I would argue that the DRS failure is the smallest thing, that the smallest adversity that a driver could face. We've seen at the Pro Series that, I think it was what's his name? He's driving for Veloce. Was it Danny Berezny? Yeah, that's his name. There you go. It escaped me for a second there. Danny Berezny, in one of the in one of the Pro Series races, his brake pedal, his physical brake pedal on the rig, failed. I think while he was leading as well, or second place, really high up, and he had to retire because of that. That's something you can't I would like to see more of this in the game, because you said it. Adversity is something that all these competitors have to. It's an additional element. It's not just the outright pace. The outright pace, for the most part, never, or not never, but almost never decides any motorsport race or championship. There's so much more that gets into it. There's the psychological element. There's the mental toughness. There's the consistency element to it. There's the track element to it. How well do you get along on certain tracks? Some drivers favor different tracks over others. How well do you get along? Well, in real F1 at least, and many other series, how well do you get along with your car? And there's just so much more. So to have a DRS failure in there, I would argue enter some more technical failures into the game where suddenly someone's engine could blow up randomly. Or make it that the drivers are gonna have to they can choose engine parts as well, and they get like 2 or 3 engine parts, just like the real F1. And then they have to choose: are they going to use an old one? Are they going to use a new one? Are they going to take a penalty for using a new one that isn't in the contingency? And I would argue add even more to it, because again, you said it, adversity is what makes a real competitor, facing adversity and overcoming it.
I think as well, one of the great examples was the Shadow Project, which was, well, last year it was brought in, and obviously Igor Fraga won it. There was one driver in particular who, when he was there at the finals, nothing went right for him. And I mean nothing. It was a driver, I believe, called Henrik. I think that was his name. I should know. I was there. I was there as part of the crew. So you'd think I'd know his name. But yeah, he just had the worst luck imaginable. He disconnected from some of the races. He retired. I believe he crashed out of the IndyCar part of the race. So he was so unlucky. But he stuck at it, and he kept a relative smile on his face. You could see how annoyed he actually was. But to be fair to him, he stuck it out. He participated in every race. He never threw a tantrum or anything like that. He was just, he kept going. And I think he won the hearts of everybody at the Shadow Project, when everyone was saying, well, surely you should let Henrik have something. Well, yes and no. It kind of works for him, because he's now won the hearts of the people there. And to be honest with you, he won my heart over as well, because a lot went wrong for him. I spoke to him afterwards and I said, look, it wasn't your year. Nothing went right. And he said, you know what? I was here for fun. It was going to be amazing if I beat Igor Fraga in the first place anyway. I've had a great time, a great experience, and I just come back and do it again next year. And I think that was an incredible head to hold over your shoulders. And that's sort of what I feel like some of these drivers should be. And when it comes to league racing, especially, you've got drivers there who, if they spin out at turn 1, they retire from the race straight away. That is, to me, an unacceptable attitude. You have to keep going. If Henrik had just thrown the rig over after race 1, after he retired, he would not have won over the hearts of everybody. Sometimes, to make yourself a great driver, you don't need to be winning every race. You don't need to be finishing on the podium. Sometimes your personality is enough for people to say to you, you know what, you are a good driver. Sure, maybe might not be the fastest, but I tell you what, when you're out there, you give it everything.
Yeah, I would instantly try to build a bridge to the real F1, where I think there's a lot of people right now who probably look at George Russell, to bring that name in, who's stuck in the worst car, always gets 19th or 20th, unless other drivers, retire from the race. Then, however many retire, that's how many places he goes up, but he's still in the bottom 2 for the most part. But, he's always keeping a smile on his face. He's always getting his head down, working hard. And I think a lot of fans in the F1 community very much appreciate that, and very much, want to see him succeed, want to see him in a better car, want to see him go up the ladder in F1. Whereas it feels like, I don't want to throw shade by no means, and I really do like Robert Kubica, but he doesn't seem to have that same kind of energy that George Russell does. And maybe it's a thing of the rookie and the veteran, but I'm not sure. But George Russell brings that energy, and he's cracking jokes in the what's it called, in the paddock. And Kubica, maybe because he's just that kind of personality, that he's a little bit more quiet, and the English is not his native language. Understandable that he's a little bit more quiet then. But he doesn't seem to bring that kind of energy. He's more like, That's the way it is. And I want to see the kind of dedication, the kind of focus that a driver, whether it's in the real world or in sim racing, the driver, when faced with adversity, says, all right, head down, nothing's lost. We can still do this. We can still get some points. We can still get this or that, whatever. We can still control the damage and at least get something out of this. And if not points, then at least we'll get some good fights out of it. At least we're going to make some nice overtakes and all that. And we get practice as well. So there's that. But, you know, I just don't understand the drivers who go, oh, man, I lost my front wing at turn one. Let's go into the pits and then I'm going to retire. Why? You can pull off something really nice if you're just sticking with it. The moment you lose a front wing, you go into the pits lap one to have a change, is the moment you can think, okay, how can I salvage this? Not the moment where you go, hey, I'm going to retire. You go, all right, front wing change. Which tires do I need now with one lap less? What's the best strategy here to go? And then you go out there and you try to pull off the best strategy possible, and you try to make some overtakes and you try to get it done.
Yeah, and like I said, that's what wins people over, the fact that you keep going in there and keep fighting on. I mean, with Henrik, just as the example there is a perfect example. You know, he stuck it out. He shrugged his shoulders whenever he disconnected or whenever he crashed out. I remember in the iRacing race at Indianapolis when they were in the IndyCars, he actually crashed out of that one. He actually made a mistake. And when he hit the wall, he looked straight up at the camera and just pulled like a, that wasn't meant to happen face. And honestly, his personality there was just so commendable for how much was working against him. You know, he won me over at that event, that's for sure.
Yeah, unfortunately, his name probably won't come up all too much outside of that, which it should, because if you have that kind of attitude, I think you're gonna go far wherever you go, whether it's in sim racing, whether it's in life. I think if you have that kind of attitude where you go, all right, I am faced with adversity, but I'm pushing through. That is just worth so much in general in life. And so I think some of these drivers are going to have to learn that if you can. I'm not even sure you can learn that. Maybe if someone outright tells you, just grabs you by the shoulders and shakes you and goes, you need to learn that. Then maybe, but probably not even then. It's just it's a thing of, it's a state of mind that you need to get into. And that's why you see so many esports teams, whether it's, I'm not sure if that's such a trend in sim racing already. It should be, but certainly you see it in other esports that a lot of esports organizations work together with mental coaches, where they try to put them in the right mindset. I remember the biggest story where a mental coach ever came into play was probably the whole story about Optic Gaming back in the day when Nadeshot was still playing for them. And they heartbreakingly lost at probably one of the biggest stages in Call of Duty. And it was just crushing. And then they went back to their, I don't know if they had a headquarter at the time. I think they did. They went back to the headquarters. They talked to a mental coach, and they rebuilt. A year later, they're on the same stage. They're playing the grand finals. And the mental coach, I think, was in the audience at the time, but they were talking to the mental coach all the way through the tournament. After every game, they were like, all right, we need to stay in this mindset. We need to, get this done. And they won. 1 year later, they come back, rebuilt, and win it all. And that's, that's when faced with adversity. Sometimes you just need that mental coach that tells you, hey, head down, no giving up. Sometimes you just need that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that being the next development in F1 esports, that the 10 teams bring mental coaches on board if they don't have them already.
And I think that's one of the next big things for F1 esports. You've got in F1 esports, there's the fact that you now have the radio. You've got actual quote unquote chief engineers who, you know, they will have people around them and actual radio communications which with each of the drivers in the Pro Series. And I think that's a massive step forward, because now you actually get to hear these drivers. It's not just watching them and go full flat out and everything. Now you can actually hear them, and you can hear the pressure they're under or how relaxed they are. You know, no one's pulled an Alonso yet where he's say, you know, I'm actually quite comfortable. I believe that was back in 2005. But the point is,
hold on, or an Alonso with a said GP2 engine.
GP2, well, yeah. I mean, they're equal cars in F1 so you
sorry, they could say GP2 DRS.
Hashtag GP2 DRS. Get it trending. Get it trending on Twitter. Do it. No, I'm only kidding. The great thing about F1 esports is it's open to. Well, I would say it's open to everybody, but this is a. I love it. Yeah, those of you listening back, Austin's just put hashtag GP2 DRS on the screen. So
yeah, if you're listening on any podcast platform, you obviously can't see that, but since we are streaming this live on YouTube, we have the ability to put on little banners on the video, and yeah, hashtag GP2 DRS is the banner right now.
Which I've only just realised, if you're listening back, you won't have seen the F1 2005 video. So I hope the description was good enough.
Yes.
But the thing is about F1 esports is people don't like change, and that's apparent when F1 integrates esports into its own, into the real Formula One as well. And when an F1 post goes up about esports, you have a load of people saying, well, this isn't a sport. What's this? This is just people playing video games. And I would love to put those people on a simulator and see how they do, because the F1 simulator has been an integral figure in learning and understanding how a car works. Not necessarily 100%, because you can never simulate real life. I believe one YouTube creator by the name of Empleman said the only thing we fear is what we don't understand, referring to gravity and all that. But that's the thing, is that people don't like change. So it's going to take an entire generation for people to realize actually F1 esports is a thing. It is competitive, and it is now $1 billion industry, and that's what people keep forgetting. Why would big sponsors like New Balance come in? Why would people like Hype Energy sponsor AOR? Why would these big sponsors come in and offer, the money that comes with them, and let that go to waste? That to me doesn't make any sense. They clearly see the value in F1 esports, and so it's only a matter of time before the majority of people say, well, yeah, actually, F1 esports, you can consider it a sport. Because I would love to know because let me just bring up the definition of a sport, okay?
Mm-hmm.
People say it's not a sport. The definition of sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. Now, to me, F1 esports, it involves physical exertion. If you see those guys at the end of it, they have just done a workout. Who cares? It's an hour long. Your heart rate goes up. I know. I've been there. I've been in rookie races in iRacing, and I still get nervous. Like it's the skill as well. Well, you need practice to be good at esports. The guys racing in the Pro Series right now have put hours and hours into this. Where an individual competes against another for others for entertainment. Now, it's being streamed right now on Twitch as we speak on the Formula One channel for others' entertainment. Now, you tell me now how esports can't be considered a sport, because what has just happened there is we've described what a sport is, and we've linked what a sport is to what F1 esports is, and found a link.
Yeah, Yeah, based and I think some people might actually. I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. I think some people would argue about the physical exertion part, but having raced with the wheel and pedals myself, as all these drivers do, and I have to say that I've raced endurance races. I've done 24-hour races, obviously not by myself. We had driver changes, but I had like the longest stint I've done was like 6 hours. No, like there was nothing else I did in those 6 hours other than drinking. Obviously no alcohol. Not that you're getting any ideas here. No, I had a bottle to drink next to me, and that's about it. That was all I had. No food next to me, which in hindsight, it's not the best idea because man, was I hungry afterwards. But it is physical exertion. It is 6 hours of sitting and basically you do the same as if you're driving a car for 6 hours. You're steering, your feet are pushing the pedals down. You're doing exactly the same thing as if you were driving in a real car. The only thing you don't experience are the G-forces and maybe the temperature, depending on where you are. But it's easier to regulate the temperature in your apartment and in your room than it is in a car, especially an F1 car, but GT car, same thing. But other than that, it is a physical workout. It is exertion, totally. Having done it myself, it certainly is. Sure, oftentimes with esports, people think, oh yeah, these people are just, clicking and tapping on their keyboards. That's not how you race. That's not how you do sim racing. Sim racing is with wheel and pedal. It doesn't have to be. You can use a controller, but on the top level, everyone uses wheel and pedals. It gives you the most consistency. That's why people use it. You can be quick on one lap with a controller. You can be. You certainly can be. There's plenty of examples in GT Sport. There's some examples in F1 esports, but the consistency you will never get because if you look at a controller, what's the difference between full tilt of the analog stick to the left and full tilt to the right? Is that an inch, maybe? It's about an inch, isn't it? Maybe 2.
If that.
On a wheel, I mean, it's much more. You can be much more precise. The same thing goes for pedals and the triggers on a controller. On a controller, that's like half an inch maybe between full throttle and no throttle. Not even half an inch. Jeez. On a pedal, I mean, it's pretty much the same like a real car pedal. That's probably 4 or 5 inches. That's 10 times what you get from a trigger. So you're 10 times more precise. And that's what gives you the consistency on a wheel compared to a pad. So on one lap, if you hook it up just perfectly, yeah, on a controller, it can be just as fast as on a wheel. But over the course of 20, 30, 35, 40 laps, yeah, the wheel is going to beat the controller every single time. And that is physical exertion. The controller, not so much. You just tapping some buttons on a controller. You can even like rest and do all that. On a wheel, it is exhausting. I could tell you from experience. I've done it for a long time. I have retired a long time ago as well. mostly because I don't have a wheel anymore.
Right. I was going to say, like, we could get together and do an endurance race at some point, but yeah.
Yeah, without a wheel, that's a bit of an issue.
That's right. Oh, you can be my spotter. Yes.
I have done spotting before, yeah. So
we'll stream it. We have a new show.
Oh no. But yeah, no, I've basically, I gotta tell you, in my 13 years, that's half my life that I've been involved with sim racing in some capacity. Plenty of years as a driver, as a competitor, plenty of years as a commentator, 11 years as a competitor. I've done, race engineer, as we called it back in the day, to be like, we're just like the real guys, which we weren't because we were amateurs, total amateurs. And I don't mean amateurs in the sense of we didn't get paid. I mean amateurs in the sense of skill. But it was fun, we were working on strategy. When do we come into the pits? Where we did the whole 10 yards, we did all of it. Like, where are we going to get out after the pit stop? Is it worth it now? Should we wait a lap? All of that. And I've even, that's the greatest thing. Back in the day on rFactor, which is where I started, doing this kind of competitively. There was no, or at least we didn't use the AI safety car, because it was a little buggy and there were issues with it. So we had an actual safety car driver. And for some of the races, that was me.
See, that's an awesome idea.
Yeah. And I gotta say, just think how useless you feel waiting there for. And we did full race distances, by the way. So we did this for 90 minutes. Not like F1 Esports where they do 50%. No. 100% is what we did. And imagine sitting there for 90 minutes just going, am I going to do something here today, or what's going on? Am I just watching? 90 minutes of just waiting and not being called upon. And that was pretty much what I did for the most part. There were moments where, so we had one guy driving the safety car. We had, I think, one or two others who were like in charge, like the race control, basically, who were then putting in the chat, in the in-game chat, saying safety car out, which was for me the signal to go, all right, here we go. Where's the leader? First thing, because you don't want to do like what was the first time there was a safety car in F1? It missed the leader. It picked up the wrong car.
It did, yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, you don't want to do that. So you have to watch out, like, who's the leader. Good thing rFactor made this quite easy, because it had the little graphic on the bottom where it showed you where the leader was. So you could do this quite easily. And yeah, I gotta say, it was a lot of fun. Even though, again, for the most part, I was just sitting there 90 minutes watching a race I wasn't participating in, just basically going like, what was his name? John Travolta in, was it Pulp Fiction? I think it was Pulp Fiction. Yeah, just where he's looking around like, is anything happening here? Is anything going on? What's going on? Hello? Anyone here? And then for 90 minutes,
That sounds like my idea of fun.
Yeah. I was 15, 16 when I did that. But I gotta tell you, you felt like you did something that was worth it to the community, to the league. And I wouldn't be opposed to Codemasters for 2020, for the F1 2020 game, putting something like this into the game where they say, hey, if you want to do a manual safety car, you can have a 21st person loading into the game. I would say 20 people, 20 drivers, obviously, in the lobby, max, because that's how many cars there are. One safety car driver, 2 or 3 spots for spectators that want to be race control, and then 2 spots for commentators. Open it up for 26 instead of 22. Right now you have 2 spectator spots. Why is it limited? I don't get that. Open it up, 26, 20 for the drivers, 1 for the safety car, 3 for race control, 2 just 5 spectators. If you want to do 2 race control and 3 commentators, if you're feeling fancy, go ahead. Although I don't like the 3 commentator model in any sport or esport. But yeah, just, or you want to do 4 race control and you have a solo commentator, like, just say 5 spectator spots, 1 safety car, and 20 drivers. And if someone wants to drive the safety car, on their own, just let them do it. We did that back in the day. We had a manual safety car driven by an actual person.
And well, let me just say, there's the 2021 regulation negotiations, and then there's this what Austin's offering. I mean, which more, which one won't get over the line? We'll have to wait and see. But I would say, Austin, we've been talking for a solid almost 75 minutes. I think it's a good time to call this an end to the very first episode of Refuse to Lose. And what I will say is thank you very much for watching. And it's time to do the plug. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at KSMCGF1.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter, that is at the Badgerman. If you want to follow me there, you can see it on the screen right now. The E in Badgerman is a 3. So if you're listening, it's THEBADG, then the number 3 RMAN. It's really hard to explain. I'm very sorry for that.
Well, you know what? To end on what has been a very interesting stream. We've watched a video where you know, the listeners can't actually they can't actually see it, but I hope we described it well. But as we'll probably say at the end of every stream, the winner ain't the one with the fastest car, son. It's just the one who refuses to lose. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I've been Kieran McGinley.
And I'm Austin Smith.
Take care of yourselves, and we will see you next time.